Hey. Don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something. Not even me. All right?
All right.
You got a dream, you got to protect it. People can't do something themselves. They want to tell you you can't do it. You want something, go get it. Period.
Welcome to Successful Dropout. This podcast is for the outliers, the innovators, the rebels, those that dare to dream and act on their dreams. I'm your host, Kylan Ginger. Join me as we find out what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. What is up, Successful Dropouts? Get stoked, because today on the show we have Michael Sitarzewski?
Perfect. Yeah, there you go.
Sitarzewski?
That works.
Okay. Michael is co-founder and CEO of Epic Playground, Inc. He is a veteran entrepreneur with a specific focus on web-based software and services. Michael considers helping people understand and leverage technology his life's work. In addition to creating companies and running Epic Playground, Michael is heavily involved in the Dallas, Texas startup community, building on the lessons from the Boulder and Denver community, where he spent 7 years. He is a mentor to several other individual startups, and he is also debt-free, including his house. And the guy has done a heck of a lot, and I'm interested to get into it. So, Michael, that's the intro I have for you, man. But tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
It's hard. You know, one of the questions that I get when I'm out and I meet new people is, so what do you do? I'm like, oh, man, come on. Which part are we talking about? So, there's the startup side, which you nailed pretty elaborately. And then we have also, I'm interested in civic things as well. So kind of involved in the homeless conversation in Dallas. I was the president of the Cedars Neighborhood Association, which is our neighborhood, and it really kind of affects how our district, our council district, treats new developments in the neighborhood and what have you. So if somebody wants to build a new project here, they have to have our approval. All kinds of fun things. You just learn over time. I'm 48, so take that for what it's worth.
Okay, so we were just talking before we launched the interview here about how you are taking an RV, you're selling a bunch of stuff, and you're taking off to travel. And I'm interested to hear about that because I've been following you on Facebook, man, and you're putting all sorts of stuff up for sale, including there was an Atari set on there.
Yeah.
Which I was like, oh, man. I mean, I wanted to comment and say, give me that, because I like video games, especially old school stuff. But I figured it might be a little hard to get that shipped. I think a couple other people had claimed it. But tell me a little bit about that decision and what that's going to be like.
So this is kind of a logical extension of what Heather and I have been planning and kind of working up to. Heather's my wife. We met in 1994. We've been together 23 years, and she's been with me.
Congratulations, man.
Yeah, thank you. It doesn't take a lot of work. What it takes is a lot of communication. So you can't be afraid to have a conversation with your significant other. And if you are, then there's a problem that needs to be addressed. Anyway, so funny story about that Atari. In fact, before I get started too far down the road, somebody asked me, as soon as I posted that thing, she hit me on like 5 different methods. So SMS and Facebook and everywhere. And she said, I want it. I said, okay, all right, fine. And so she said, what do you want for it? And I sent her a link to eBay, which was something that was a little bit less than what we had. It was $200, right? And so she said, how about 220 or something like that? I said, fine. And let me talk about it with my wife. And then all of a sudden I get another Facebook Messenger request from one of the council people here in Dallas, City Council. And he says, hey, is that Atari still available? I'm like, yeah, but I just got a bid on it. And instead of going back and forth between them, I added them both to Facebook Messenger and had them kind of duke it out right there. That was funny.
No way.
Yeah. So ended up going to the lady, and she's putting it in a co-working space here in Dallas. So there's like 65 games, and this Atari is going to be one of the future points of the space. But anyway,
so how much did they bid it up for then?
It was $265 is where we got to.
Nice, man.
Yeah, not too bad. But it was my wife's. It was an original 2600 and in great shape and so on. So it was worth
Is
it.
your wife? Your wife sounds awesome then.
Yeah, she is awesome for a number of reasons, of which you'll find out here in just a second. So when we were in Dallas, when we left Dallas, we were living in an apartment. I think it was about 1,200 square feet or something like that. When we moved to Colorado, we moved into about the same size and then into 2,200 square feet. And this was our first house that we purchased together, and it was 2009. It was, like I said, about 2,200 square feet. We decided to finance that house, again, our first house, and our payment was about 14% of our take-home income, which is very abnormal for the United States. Generally, it's 30 to 50% of one's take-home. And we decided we didn't want to saddle ourselves with a house payment, so we did much less, but it was a brand new house. It was beautiful. When we moved back to Dallas in 2013, we decided to do a little bit of an upgrade, which was off course for us. So we bought a house here. It was $430K. It's a big, beautiful 3,400 square foot house out in Flower Mound, and had a big yard and the pool and all the things that you would want in the suburban life. Grade A schools, everything you want. And what we determined is that was way too much house. Way too much house. We had a 3-car garage. We had 2 cars, a motorcycle, and we did all this stuff. And we kind of looked at each other like, what the heck are we doing? Where did this come from? So we pulled my daughter out of school. I don't know if you caught that part. She's unschooled, so she doesn't go to school at all. She teaches herself.
Wow.
We teach her how to learn. So she didn't need that school. We didn't need all that space, and we decided to move to downtown Dallas in a neighborhood called the Cedars. And that was 1,700 square feet. So half the space, which meant we had to get rid of a lot of crap. And we did. Yeah. We don't have a car currently. We don't drive. So we take public transit, walk and bike and those kinds of things. And then, last fall or so, it kind of came up that a tiny house would be cool. And my wife looked at me kind of sideways and said, there's no way we could fit into that. But she had been thinking kind of mindfully about the things we buy anyway. So how many towels do you need? Or, she doesn't like plastic at all, especially the non-recyclable kind. So just all these little things added up to the point where we're like, all right, let's think about a tiny house. And then one thing led to another thing. And we decided to do this like really crazy idea, which was see if we could survive with just a backpack. So all the clothes, it's nuts, man. We did it. So all the clothes for 1 week, plus toiletries and all of our electronics in one backpack. And that's what we were going to go to Orlando with and spend a week and see if we could do it. Normally a family of 3 takes like a bag and a check-on bag and all these other things. And you see people, it's ridiculous, like 5 bags. We went with just a backpack and it was fine. It's perfectly fine. The goal there was to do what's like kind of like an Airbnb lifestyle. So you have this backpack and you go from town to town, city to city, country to country. And anywhere you want to go, it's about $15 to $20 a night for 3 people, anywhere in the world. And just look, it's really cool. So that's what we were going to do. We were just going to bounce around. I keep coding. I'm doing what I'm doing now. And she's a Disney travel planner, so she doesn't have to be anywhere in particular. And so we thought that'd be a great lifestyle, teach the child how to travel and she can get to know the world and what have you. Now, back to the story. Yeah. Just real quick. We decided that...
To clarify really quick, so that was, you took like an experimental trip kind of to Orlando? So, and this was from 2013, you started thinking this way and then moving up until now?
Yeah, exactly. In late last year, we decided to take a week-long trip and see if this would actually work. And it did, which was great.
It did, okay.
But we have 2 dogs. And so what we settled on is it's not fair to the dogs to give up the dogs because we want to go travel the world. So we kind of put that idea on hold, started thinking about it a little bit more, thought, well, how can we take the dogs with us? Right? Instead of saying no, let's do something different. So that's where this idea came from. The idea is, and actually what we're doing right now, you alluded to it, we are taking everything we own, keeping a very small amount of it and selling the rest. So we have an entire house full of stuff. I wish you could see it. There's stuff in every nook and cranny, and there is because we pulled it all out of the drawers. Anyway, that's a different story. We'll get there. So RV, across the country. We're going to be on the road for 4 months, and then we're going to end up in Central Florida somewhere. We're going to build a house by hand in the 550 to 600 square foot range that'll be completely off the grid, except for internet.
What?
That's it.
And is that the tiny house concept?
Yeah, well, so tiny houses generally, when you hear that word, people think on wheels. So there's these cute little trailers that are 8.5 feet wide and 13
There's a
feet tall.
documentary on Netflix,
Yep.
right? I think I've seen that.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. That's what people generally think of. But there's tiny houses that are on foundations as well. And those, anything under probably 800 square feet these days for a family of 3 would be considered tiny or at least small. And that's what we're after. We're going to live in probably 350 to 400 square feet, and then we'll have, I'll have a room that's dedicated to virtual reality, and my wife will have a room that's dedicated to crafting and creating. So she's a traditional artist. She sculpts, and well, she hasn't sculpted in a while, but she does painting and all these other fun things too.
No way. You guys have to be like the most interesting couple in the world.
Probably not.
They should make a documentary on you guys. Have you actually thought about that? I would watch something in a heartbeat if somebody followed you guys around with a camera.
Well, so that's a funny thing that you mentioned. What we're going to end up doing is, so we're not the only people to do this, right? There are tons of people now that are selling everything they have. They're realizing how much freedom there is in not owning anything, really. And it's kind of a movement, if you will. I don't want to say I'm jumping on a movement, but it's very freeing. As soon as you start to think about, look around your house, look all the things you have in your house. Why do you have them?
Yeah.
Why are they there? And if you didn't expressly say, I need this in my life, then you don't need it. And, maybe that's 4 pairs of underwear, socks, and shirts and what have you. And that's it. For some people, that's what they can live with. So anyway, it's just an experiment, and people are doing it in left and right. But what we're going to do, and many people are documenting it too. You can search on YouTube and find people that are off the grid or, living in an RV. There's a bunch of them. We're going to document it the same way, except we're going to do it with 360-degree video, which is going to be, we'll be the only people that are doing that. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So every time we sit in front of a camera, of course, the camera's going to be facing us. That'll be the primary opening view. Mm-hmm. But you'll be able to spin it around and see everything around us. And so that's going to be a beach. It's going to be the forest. It could be an RV park. Who knows what it's going to be, but you'll have the freedom to look around.
That is so cool. So once you do start doing this, where can people find that then?
It's epicmini.life.
Epicmini.life. Okay.
Yep.
We'll have a link in the description.
Awesome.
So you mentioned build by hand.
Uh-huh.
So literally, like you and your wife or your family, you're going to build this house by hand. Do you have any construction experience or?
Well, no, but that has never stopped me before. So here's what I found. In the last probably 6 months or so, I've been thinking about this and kind of trying to figure out how to go about it. And fortunately for me, there's this thing called YouTube with people that have actually done it. Right?
Imagine that.
Yeah, it's weird. This YouTube thing will keep coming up over and over and over again.
You're starting to sound like me, man.
It's great, though.
Yeah.
So anyway, you watch people, you see what their caveats were. You can find a video from any contractor or contractors on how to do exactly the right thing that you need to do in this particular space, the materials, everything. So Go search for how to pour a concrete foundation and watch with amazement how there are 3,000 videos of people working with concrete showing you how to do this stuff. Look, we're going to make mistakes. There is no doubt whatsoever. We're going to jack some stuff up, and it's probably going to be expensive and what have you, but it's going to be fun and a learning experience.
Absolutely, man. I mean, just the other day, we moved to this new place, and we're doing some remodels and stuff like that. We had to lay some slate flooring. I have no idea, how to do that, but a couple of YouTube searches will tell you just about everything you need to know. And it's funny you mentioned concrete pouring. I have a buddy who just he's rehabbing a house, and that's one of the things he mentions that he did, and the whole foundation had to be repoured, and the house had to be jacked up and stuff like that, and so it's so true. You can, and I call it just-in-time learning. It's learning things when it's necessary to take action on whatever you've decided your goal is. So, and I really resonate with you, Michael, when you talk about the simplicity and putting everything in a backpack. Living up here and growing up in the mountains, we do a lot of backpacking, actually, where you throw everything you need for a week or two in a bag and you head out into the wilderness, sometimes, 40 to 80 miles.
Right.
And it is some of the most, it's what I do to go clear my mind and clear just all the mental and even physical clutter from my life, because it takes you back down to the basics. And there's nothing more freeing and that causes you to just think more clearly than, all you're worried about is where are we going to get our next meal, and you got to stay warm, and where are we going to, camp or, pitch a tent tonight, and it's back to the basics, and all this extra stuff that you realize doesn't even matter is kind of cleared out. And then you're able to actually focus on the stuff that does matter when you get back. So I'm curious though, so you've kind of explained what you're doing here. It's absolutely fascinating. I'm really excited to follow the journey. But I'm curious, what's the why behind all of it? What's the philosophy that's causing you guys to take these actions?
So I kind of sighed there, because there are a bunch of things that have led to this particular point. I don't expect very many people from the suburbs, say like Plano or Frisco, our suburbs here, to just say, the heck with it, I'm going to sell everything and hit the road. Right. I think it takes a while to get to a point where you're willing to do this, much less you actually pull the trigger and set things into motion that will get you here. And so, I'm going to go down a few things that are kind of important that led us to this particular decision. So in 2001, I quit smoking, right? I'd smoked for 15 years. I quit smoking in one day, and that day was the day we moved to Colorado from Dallas. It's the last time I had a cigarette. Okay. In 2004, I lost 40 pounds by eating mindfully. So I kind of calculated how many calories my body needed, and I ate that many calories. Didn't care about the protein and all that other crap. I just ate the number of calories I was supposed to. Lost 40 pounds, still gone. 2007, wow. Heather and I paid off all of our consumer debt. It was about $50,000. It took us 1 year. I sold a car, and we did a whole bunch of other things that were very mindful and intentional with money. So those three things alone are things that people, if they can celebrate one of those things, it's amazing. If you can do multiple of them, it's great. I talked to you about buying the house. When we decided to buy a house, we got it with 14% of our annual household income. That's what our payment would have been. And so people don't do that. They spend more than they need to. We drove one car for quite a while. The second car we bought after that, I bought a 1989 Mitsubishi Montero. It cost $1,700. And then I had to put another $1,700 into it because the thing smoked. I'm telling you all this because a lot of times in life, the most fun things you can possibly do and the most value you can get out of life is to experiment and tinker with what your belief systems are, right? And so that's how we got here, is can we do this? Could we do this? Yes, hell yes, we can. How much fun would it be? It'd be amazing. Let's change everything and go do it. That's how you get to this point.
Experiment and tinker with what your belief systems are.
Yeah, always. Question everything, constantly.
Yeah, well, and you're going beyond questioning. You're literally taking steps and actions that are contrary to the way you've lived and thought, previously.
Right.
And I bet it just makes for some unbelievable memories. And I feel like a lot of people talk and think and dream about doing stuff like that, right. And not even stuff that's like a lot of people think and dream about. Oh, I want to go travel the world and all this stuff, but to say like I'm just going to see what it's like to get rid of my brand new car and buy an old beater car and drive that around and see what happens, see what changes in my mindset about what it takes to live in the world. And so it's absolutely phenomenal. I love that mindset. Do you have any idea how long you're going to try out kind of the tiny house concept and this whole lifestyle, or is it just you're going to start and you'll see when the next time you want to change or challenge your belief system is? Yeah,
we do that pretty constantly anyway. One of those other examples is here in Dallas. Dallas is a quote unquote driving city. You can't live in Dallas without a car. Well, I'm here to tell you we've been doing it for almost a year, and it's perfectly fine, right? Right. So as far as the tiny lifestyle goes, I don't expect that to change. I know that's weird after what I just said, but I think what will happen is we'll just find other ways to optimize. I don't see us ever going back to, the 3,400 square foot house in the suburbs. That just doesn't calculate right now. But we'll experiment with things like solar, maybe efficiencies in solar and efficiencies in off-grid water usage. And, we'll have plenty of stuff to keep us busy.
Because you said live off the grid, and
Yeah.
so that encompasses a lot
Have you
besides the internet.
Have you ever heard of a Fresnel lens?
A Fresnel lens?
Yeah.
I have not. What is that?
Yeah. So basically what this is it's a, they come in many different shapes and forms, but it's essentially, have you ever played with a magnifying glass and burned things?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Most people have, right? But imagine that 2 feet by 3 feet or 4 feet. And that focused energy from the sun can get up to about 2,000 or above 2,000 degrees. And so you can actually melt metal and glass and all kinds of fun things with the focus point of this lens, which means that, no, it's beautiful. Go on YouTube, find the videos. It's so simple. And the lens that you use is you find one of these old 4x3, like giant televisions, like an 80-inch television projection, real projection, pull the lens out of it, mount it just correctly, and you can do some amazing things. Like this guy on YouTube, he melted 10 pennies within a couple of seconds. Pennies.
Jeez.
Just melted them. And so my thought was, all right, this is the way Michael thinks. I see this lens, I see the power of the sun hitting this particular point. Could you boil water, capture the vapors, and fill up gallon jugs of purely distilled water from just the sun? Turns out you can. Huh. You can do that. And so we're going to experiment with stuff like that. And imagine the learning experience with my daughter building this contraption to actually grab water out of, or distilled water out of a creek or what have you. Cool stuff, right?
Yeah, seriously.
So anyway, that's the kind of stuff that'll keep us busy while we're out there.
I like that. I felt like I just saw into the mind of Michael for a little bit.
Because we can. That's really the big answer that you're looking for, right? Why would you do something like this? Why did we decide to go tiny? Because we can.
Yeah. I love it. So you just mentioned your daughter, and you mentioned that she is basically unschooled, I think is how you put it, and I've heard that term before. So explain that process. Like, what led you guys to make that decision, and what does that actually look like in practice? You explained a little bit with the magnifying glass and stuff, but
sure. So going back, we talked about kind of when we were offline. We talked about I dropped out of high school twice, right? Once wasn't good enough.
Yep.
But before that, I spent probably half of my 6th grade year skipping school. So if you kind of put that into context, 6th grade, I'm skipping school, right? Who does that? Truants do that, kids that are ne'er-do-wells and what have you. But the reason I did that was I was bored. School bored me to tears. The classes that I loved, I would binge on, and I would ace them. The classes I didn't care about, I just would let them go, and I'd do average or poor, and that really kind of was a thing throughout my life, and it was really hard to be in school because if I didn't like it, I was told constantly that I needed to do better, and I wasn't keeping up with the class, and there was all this negativity around things I really didn't care about in the first place. Right? So
yeah.
Then I noticed that pattern in my daughter in the 4th grade, and these days it's a little bit different. Because when the school teacher pulls you aside and they want to have this parent-teacher conference with you because your kid is fidgety and is kind of, moving around and doesn't sit still and what have you, and you're sitting at the same table with the teachers and your knee is shaking, right? Because I just bounce my knee because that's what I do when I'm in conversation.
You're doing the same thing.
Exactly. I'm like, so wait a minute. You're telling me that because she can't sit still, she is being disruptive in class, okay, and then she does really well in some classes and not others. I've seen this pattern before. I recognize this pattern. So we decided to pull her out. And so what the process of unschooling is you basically give your child 100% leeway in what they want to do and what they want to learn. You don't dictate. You don't give them courseware. You don't give them any goals or objectives. You basically back off and let the child be a child. And my wife's only real influence is teaching her how to learn, not what to learn, but how. And so she finds her own things. When we first did this, she taught herself how to write Java because she wanted to build Minecraft mods. So
That's great.
there you go. And it just cascaded from there.
I mean, a lot of people think that kids should avoid video games, and I've noticed people think like, oh, they're without school, you don't learn this concept of dedicating time and energy to something, focusing on something. They just want to play video games all day, for instance. But like in your daughter's case, she is disciplined. She does know how to be disciplined. Maybe not with school, but with Minecraft, and as a result, she learned how to code.
The first day she was taking this video course, she spent 9 hours on a couch. 9 hours sitting in one place for a child of her age at the time. I think she was almost 10, learning how to write code. So the way this went down is she had a laptop, a little MacBook Air. When you buy this course, it was $149, something like that, from a website called Youth Digital. And then they give you like a 2 gigabyte download, which is Clips Studio and GIMP and all these different pieces of software. And then you play videos on the website, pause them, and then go execute the instructions the guy told you, right? So what we did is I put the videos up on our big screen TV. It's a 65-inch plasma, which we're selling for $300, by the way, if anybody wants it. And then she had her laptop in her lap. So she would have the videos up on the big screen and her laptop in her lap. And 9 hours she sat there like that. I think she got up to pee once. So
Wow.
Crazy times. But when you're entertained and you're passionate about the thing you're doing, you'll do it for hours and hours on end. Talk to any programmer who's really into what they're doing. They'll tell you they program for like 48 hours straight and they barely sleep because they're so impassioned about this one thing. How do you get that passion into every American or every person in the world? That's what we need to figure out how to do.
So when you pulled her out of school, and this question is for the sake of those listening, were you worried at all that she might not, latch on to something and really find something to be disciplined about? Were you worried that maybe, what do you do about basic stuff like the maths and sciences and maybe learning another language? Or are you just not worried about that?
So fourth grade is an interesting year because by fourth grade, you've got basic math skills. You understand some of the fundamentals of science, right? You know how to read by then. And if not, that's okay too. But the thing about fourth grade is you already have the basic skills. And so all you're doing from then on is you're improving those skills. And you're doing so at a pace that is the average of the class, right? That's how schools are taught. The average of the class, not the high end, not the low end, but the average. So if you're behind on any of that stuff, you're going to have to play catch up. You're going to have to try harder, quote on air quote, right? So I wasn't necessarily concerned about her in that regard because the plan is to have her learn the things that she wanted to. And if she needed to learn some ancillary skill set to do those things, then she would. For example, writing in Java, you have to know math, right? And so she would have to learn the basic amount of math to do the things she needed to do. Lo and behold, she learned how to do what she needed to do. And I think most people can do that. If, for example, I don't know anything about construction. I know the basics, right? I know kind of, how to nail a nail into the thing. And I know I'm not giving myself enough credit, but you get the idea here. I don't know how to pour a concrete slab. I'm going to figure that out pretty damn quick because I'm going to buy all the concrete, get the water. I got to figure it out. So that's what I expected out of her. And it's worked out really well.
So do you think this would work for anybody, the unschooling process? Do you think most people are just scared?
I think it would work for more people than they think it would. Probably one of the advantages we had in doing it is my wife is a Disney travel planner, and so she works at home. I work at home most of the time, and so we're both here with her, practically 24/7. And so there's that. I think that it does require a certain kid, possibly, just like, this bothers me a lot. There's this thing called STEAM, right? Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Well, duh. But not every kid is going to learn how to code. Just like not every kid is going to go into advanced algebra or, geometry. Who cares? Not every kid needs to learn how to code. Therefore, not every kid is going to work well in a homeschool or an unschool situation. Like every kid is different. So to say that would work for everyone, no, I don't think I would say that. I would say that there's a very specific recipe, and if you match most of the qualifications, it'll work very well for you.
Awesome. So, Michael, I'm interested to hear a little bit about your dropout story, and as much as you can tell us about that experience and what that was like. So you mentioned you dropped out of high school once or twice because once wasn't good enough. So
Right.
What's that story?
So I was in Worcester, Massachusetts. It's the town that's just west of Boston. And, again, I tried out for the football team, and, I thought that was the thing that I had to do. And then just found myself really being bored, and I didn't know how to express that so much back then. So I found myself again skipping most of the classes, and I'd play hacky sack. I got really good at hacky sack. And I ended up hanging out with a bunch of stoners. There are different cliques in schools, the stoners and geeks and all those guys. And I ended up hanging out with a bunch of stoners because they were skipping class too. And it sounded like fun. Never smoked, but hung out with a bunch of stoners. Got to know Van Halen through that experience, which was kind of cool.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, what's that story?
Not actually know Van Halen. I have a funny story about Van Halen, but I got to know that genre of music, like hard rock and what have you. So.
Oh, okay. I got you.
But I decided that I was just going to quit. I'd skipped so much school that I was kind of building this problem with attendance and what have you. So I just quit, and I went back the next year with the intention. So when I quit, I was intending to go back and just take 10th grade over. That's what my idea was. And so I did that. And then in the 12th grade, I was in Tacoma, Washington. And again, just bored out of my mind. Not really understanding that I was bored out of my mind, but I was sitting in the back of English class one day, and I was having a conversation with a fellow student that also happened to be while the teacher was teaching. So that was not good. She called me out on it, and I'm like, you know what? You're right. I'm sitting back here having a conversation, distracting this person from doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's just not fair. So talked to my dad. I was living with my dad at the time. And I said, hey, I think I want to drop out of school. And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. We'll figure it out. And so he said, okay, I trust you. Go ahead. And so I quit. The next day, I got my GED and then started a graphic design business, which is another funny story.
Wow. Okay. So really quick, your dad, it sounds like he was very willing to kind of, you said he trusted you.
Yeah.
Was he an entrepreneur? I guess, where did you why was he okay with that? And where did you get this tendency to, I guess, just think and act outside of the box? Was it in the family?
It kind of is in the family. My parents were divorced when I was 8. So it was a small town called Helena, Arkansas. They were divorced, and they asked me to choose which parent that I wanted to live with. It was a very interesting decision for an 8-year-old, right? I chose my dad. And, it turns out that was a really good decision in many ways. I don't know where I'd be if I'd chosen my mom. No slight against mom, but it's a very traditional upbringing with her, right? My dad, however, we moved around a lot. So I got to know a whole bunch of new people all the time. I had to become that new kid in school every time I went to a new school. Actually advantageous if you have the personality for it. But he had a couple of businesses. He ran nightclubs, for a while, at least the accounting part of nightclubs. He was a CPA, so when they got divorced, he was a CPA in a town of, 5,000 people or so. And here's how he thinks. My first exposure to to a computer, not a personal computer, was probably 1977 or so. And it was a terminal that was in my dad's accounting office. It was downtown Helena, Arkansas. It was a terminal to the college, the community college in Helena. And he was actually renting time on that computer to do accounting for his clients.
And was that kind of a new concept back then?
Nobody did that. That was not
did accounting on a computer, you mean?
Exactly. Period. Nobody did that because they were mainframes and they were very expensive. But he talked to the administration, and he had a terminal in his office. So that was my first exposure to computers.
Wow, so he was just very kind of forward thinking and yeah.
again, willing to experiment and fail. I think that's the key, and seeing that kind of constantly over that next decade would be where I got it from. He often talked about this thing. It's kind of a known unknown, which is the gift of gab. Have you ever heard of this?
I have not. No.
Do you know people that can, like, they're waiting for their coffee in line at Starbucks and they just strike up a conversation with some random person next to them?
Totally.
That's what that is. That's the gift of gab.
Okay.
You're able to talk to anybody about anything, anytime, and you can do it. That's a useful skill to have. It's terrifying to most people. Like, I don't know that person. Why would I ever talk to them?
Including myself.
So I can do that. I can talk to anybody about anything as long as there's not an ask on the other side, right? Like, I'm not trying to sell them something. That's when I start to get a little nervous. So anyway, point is that that skill set of being able to think just a little bit differently for most people is encouraged and was encouraged as a kid.
Now, really, really quick, when you talk about the gift of gab, and like, I guess when you're, because I recognize that that's a valuable skill. I mean, I'm not naturally like that. It's taken a lot of practice and time for me to even just get comfortable with these kinds of interviews with people I've never met.
You're doing a great job, by the way.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome.
I appreciate that. But so say you're at a line in Starbucks or something, and you do start talking to somebody. Is there a process you go through in your mind, like maybe a checklist of certain questions to ask that maybe you can give to our listeners who aren't as good as that and want to practice?
The only formula that I could, as you were asking the question, I'm like, wow, what do I do? Generally, it's something very unique that is going to catch them off guard. And I think catching them off guard is part of what makes it interesting. So, if somebody spills a drink behind the counter, that's an easy, like, hey, did you see that? It just could be anything random. Like, it's, you're wearing pink socks. That's amazing. You know what I mean? It can be just anything.
And then do you ask typically the same kind of questions, like about occupation or family or what their hobbies are, or just kind of let the conversation flow where it goes?
Yeah, it totally depends on the person. Sometimes they'll just kind of smile and nod at you. They may have headphones in and not even acknowledge you. It's just, whatever. Let it go where it's going to go. I don't really do it with an intent other than just to occupy time in line, right? Make it a little bit more entertaining.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's go back to your dropout story. And you were saying you dropped out. You talked to your dad. He was like, "Fine, let's do this." And then you said the next day you started a business. I forget what it was, but what was that, and how did that process go? Continue the story there, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Graphic design. So my dad at the time was working at Robert Half and Associates, which is an accounting temporary accounting service. You hire somebody to come in and work in your business and help you with accounting. And he also on the side had a magazine called the Tacoma Dome Guide. And the Tacoma Dome is the world's largest indoor arena that's made out of wood or with a wood roof. Really cool stuff up in Tacoma. But there wasn't a guide, so he created this little magazine from scratch. And I told him when he was doing that, I was like, look, I would do that magazine for $10 a page, design it and all that stuff for $10 a page. And he was paying a lady $35 a page to do it at the time.
There you go.
So I undercut her pretty significantly, but it actually turned out to be one of the really good, tools in my life is to figure out how to compete in a business. And that was my first graphic design client. And then out of that, of course, came other opportunities. So that's how I got started.
And now I started a little list here because I went through your the PowerPoint you sent me. So eventually, I mean, and I love you've got it all laid out on kind of a timeline, and maybe, I don't know how comfortable you are with sharing that, but maybe we can link to that because I think you've just done so much, and I think it'd be really interesting for people who are more interested in your story to see that because you had it very nicely laid out, but it looks like you went on.
I made it a public link, so
perfect.
So share it if you want.
Awesome, thanks. But it looks like you started an online apartment guide, also some sort of online coupon distributor. You pivoted to classifieds alongside Craigslist. You did a dating site, and then a company called Hypersites, which this looks like you sold. You've been on podcasts. You've got your current venture, which is Epic Playground. So I think there's a little too much to go into all of it right now, but maybe give us some of the highlights some of the best stories and lessons you learned from each, and maybe talk about, some of your favorite experiences building all of those companies.
So 1994, well, I guess this story actually starts with Apartments on Demand, probably starts in 1992, oddly. 1992, there was a magazine called Mondo 2000. And if you want to, you can just Google that thing. But ultimately what it was, are you familiar with Wired magazine?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know Wired? So this magazine predates Wired by about 5 years or so, if I remember right. But it was about cyber culture. If you put cyber culture in air quotes and you Google that thing, it was all about the people that are geeks that are going to win in the future and lead the future. Think cyberpunk kind of things, like a bunch of. You
said 92?
Yeah, that was 92.
So that was right around when the internet was becoming a thing, really?
It was becoming a thing, yeah. In fact, they used to cover like these really futuristic technologies like DVDs and fiber optics and all of these great things. But that's where I learned most of this kind of future tech, right? Well, they came out with an episode or a magazine that featured some of the things they thought were going to be really big. The internet was one of them. And at the time we had AOL and those kinds of things. So I was like, wow, this decentralized communications network sounds like a big deal. I'm going to go learn about it. And so I did, taught myself HTML and the basics of how to operate a server and all those things. And we ended up writing Apartments on Demand because we thought it was a good idea. So you were asking for lessons learned. With Apartments on Demand, today we know this process called customer development, right? You have an idea, you talk to people that you think are going to be your customers, and you kind of figure out by asking questions whether or not you're actually solving a problem that needs to be solved. Yeah. If we had done that in 1994, 0 people would have known what the internet was, much less what a website is or an email address or any of those things. So we never would have built anything because nobody knew what it was. So that was one lesson. Lesson number 2 is when you're figuring out what your company is or what your product is, figure out what your total addressable market is. Okay, do you know who PewDiePie is?
Yeah, oh yeah.
All right,
trying to get him on the show.
He's awesome. 52 million subscribers on YouTube. Yeah. Okay, 52 million. In 1994, when we built Apartments on Demand, there were 35 million people total on the internet. The global internet had 35 million people.
That's insane. That's a great way to compare the scope there.
Yeah. So that's the growth. But
wow.
0 commercial use. So there were very few people that were setting up shop, if you will, on the internet. So going into apartment communities and telling them we have this great apartment search product on the internet. First question is, what's the internet and why do I care? And so on. So there's lesson learned there. Figure out who your market is, total addressable market. Even if we had built it and it started to catch fire, there weren't enough people to use it anyway, so it would have failed ultimately. The second lesson out of Apartments on Demand is we had an offer for an acquisition, and it was a meaningful acquisition for us at the time. I was 26 years old, and it would have changed basically how we do everything. It was a multi-million-dollar corporation that wanted to buy the assets and turn it into something amazing, and we told them no. What we should have done is said yes, and then we would have had millions of dollars in budget to actually build the thing we really wanted to build.
So why did you say no?
Because we were going to make millions of dollars on our own. We didn't need them. On your own. Yeah. So hindsight, right? Of course that was a smart move to make. We didn't make it. Then we went on to coupons using the same exact engine. So exactly the same engine that we were using for apartments, we did with coupons. We had National Tire and Battery and Schlotzsky's, 2 national advertisers. But again, not enough people on the internet to actually care. Then
you're ahead of your time.
Oh, just wait. 1996 classifieds, Craigslist. It's in the document. The big lesson there is we focused on Dallas Fort Worth, and we didn't focus on the United States. I think if we maybe changed our focus a little bit, maybe focused on some colleges or something like that where there were actually people on the internet, that might have been useful. Then we did the dating site. So here's the big lesson learned. All 3 of those other things were us trying to get people to the website to perform some action, right? They required some form of marketing, inbound kind of marketing that we know to call today. The dating site happened right around the time when directories were a thing. So Yahoo started out as a directory, like a curated directory. MSN had a directory where they would list the top dating sites. And we got into those. And we got into the top lists. And that drove people to the website, which meant, hey, we have traffic, which is amazing. Yeah. So here's a funny question for you. Our revenue model with the dating site was charging for pictures in the profile. Tell me why.
Because people wanted attractive pictures of themselves.
Yes.
There to attract a dating partner.
All right. Here's why. In 1997, when we did this, mobile phones didn't even have cameras. Digital cameras didn't exist in the market. I mean, they did exist, but they were really expensive and crappy.
Right.
Scanners were $3,000, and we happened to have one because we were also graphic designers.
Yeah.
And so what happened is we're like, hey, you know what? $5, and we'll add a photo of you to your profile. There you go. That became our revenue model. People would mail us photos with their ID on the back, and we would scan them and put them on the website.
Oh, that's crazy.
Nuts, right?
Yeah.
So,
something I wouldn't
anyway.
even think of just because how much technology's progressed. It's like, of course you can take a picture and upload it, you know?
Yeah.
Not
I
back
can
then.
take a selfie movie and make it my icon in Facebook. Awesome.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the early days.
Okay, so then you went from the dating site to then you built a company called Hypersites, which you ended up selling.
Yeah. Also, I should note, through all the 90s, through we were building those companies and those products, I actually ran a consulting company called Intelligent Networks, and then also Zero Logic, and that was an Apple value-added reseller. So before Apple had Apple stores, there were guys like me that would come to your house and work on your Macs. So I had a deal with Apple, and it was a good one. But that's how I actually made money. None of these companies made a dime. I invested a whole bunch of money into them, both time and effort and servers and what have you. But I actually made money as a consultant. So that's an important lesson for anybody listening here is, sure, go build the thing of your dreams, but unless you have some cash to be able to kind of continually put in there, you might have some interesting issues to address. We decided to take a little bit of time off from Meet Me Online and then built Hypersites. And Hypersites, to kind of put it into context, it's like Wix or Squarespace or any of those things that we know today, except it was in 2001, and JavaScript and CSS were not even standards really at the time. So browser support was varied between them. It was really hard for us to make everything work. But because we were able to make websites with a web browser that rendered exactly the same in all the current browsers at the time. So when a new Internet Explorer came out and it jacked up everybody else's website, it worked perfectly flawless on ours. The problem that we had with Hypersites was we were taking something that would typically cost between $50,000 and $100,000 of website for a company, and we were offering it for $10 a month, and that didn't compute. So the lesson learned there was make sure that you're pricing your product according to what your customers expect to pay. If we had charged $2,500 to $5,000 a month, we would have made a killing at the time. But because it was $10, you couldn't comprehend how it could be equivalent to a $100,000 website.
Interesting. So you charged too little, basically.
We charged way too little, and then we started giving it away for free, which is even worse.
Yeah. Man, we've certainly found out that lesson. We own one of the businesses we have is a hot yoga studio, actually in our hometown, and that's one of the things we found is we have one other serious competitor in town, and it was a big debate when we first launched. Do we keep our prices, below theirs at the same or higher? And then how many specials do we do? If anybody's familiar with yoga, typically there's like a special every week that a studio is running discounts, and people wait to buy. And it's kind of this this Macy's one-day sale concept where if you get known for that, people only buy when you have the sale.
Right.
And we decided to sort of go against the grain. We did our prices a little bit higher than the competition. We had a bit of a nicer space, so we felt comfortable with that. And then we stopped. We only do 2 specials a year, and we did that we implemented all that in our second year, and we did much better than our first year, and it's still going strong. And man, when those specials hit, we make a lot of money, and so I understand the concept you're talking about, and definitely a great lesson to learn for anybody listening. let's move to today. Tell me about Epic
Yeah.
Playground and what you're involved with there and what that's all about really quick.
Well, so it's really funny because after Hypersites, coincidentally, I created a company called Callisto, which was a podcast portal that would turn into audio and video analytics by way of a couple of conversations with customers, and that became Epic Playground. So the story there is Callisto was we raised about $600,000 in our first round there, and it was real-time audio and video analytics. So if you think about your site, right, your website, if you can play your podcast episodes on there, being able to see how many people are listening to which episodes right now on your website.
Yeah,
really
I would
cool
kill
data
for
to have.
that information right now.
Oh my God, most people would, and I've heard this over and over, and I think I might bring it back to life just because I can, right?
Sign me up.
But so we have
Totally.
that. The idea was to create a layer that we could put across mobile, we could put it across websites, we could put it into whatever, and track how many people are playing what wherever. We built that platform. It worked really well. We raised, like I said, $600,000. It was led by a company out of Houston called Mercury Fund at the time. They're now called DFJ Mercury. Now they're called Mercury Fund. But they're a part of the DFJ network. If you know the startup space at all, that's a really good company to have in close proximity. And then we got accepted to an accelerator called Techstars. And Techstars is based in Boulder. We applied for the San Antonio program, got accepted, flew down there, spent 3.5 months in San Antonio, flew back to Boulder. And in order to build this company the right way, we decided to rebuild the product. And we took too long to rebuild the product. My CTO left right after we got back. This is the first product that I did not build. Out of all of the things that we've talked about so far, I've actually been the lead developer on all of them. This one, when the guy left, I was like, well, okay, that sucks because I have no idea how to do what we were doing anyway. So we lost most of our traction, lost most of our momentum. And by then I'd raised close to $1 million and decided to move back to Dallas after we ran out of money there.
And so that platform, it doesn't exist anymore, at least for the podcasting that you were talking about?
No, it exists in archives, like tar balls. So it's kind of the same thing as putting it into a closet and having it collect dust. That's where this code base is. I think I could probably recreate it much more efficiently now, very quickly. So that's what I'm thinking about doing.
Gosh, man, I would totally re-explore that because I have some other podcasts in the network and stuff, and or podcasters, and man, we're just always talking about that. If we could have more information on the stats, all you can see is downloads, and it's just very limited information you have.
You're using Blueberry?
Actually, Libsyn.
Yeah, Libsyn. Right. So there's a competitor that we had called Blueberry.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them. Yeah.
Yeah, basically they had the whole market by the neck. Back then it was a relatively small market. Today I think it would be much better because anybody with a PC or a Mac or even a phone these days can make a podcast. So they don't have the stranglehold they used to.
Yeah. So Michael, you've obviously been a part of several different kind of companies and startups and industries, and you seem to have a really good eye towards the future. I mean, being able to see the potential of the internet before, most of America could. I'm wondering, looking towards the future now in 2017, what are some of the big technologies that you see are really going to make a rise and become really prominent here moving forward in, say, the next 5 to 10 years? What are you looking forward to?
So, we kind of started the show off with that concept. I alluded to it actually in there, but I think where we're headed is a much different place. Today, we think of social networks like Facebook and Twitter and these kinds of things, and they're very kind of passive, right? You look at them and you read them and you tweet and you do these kinds of things. But I think much sooner than you think, not you personally, but most people, is going to be this VR concept. It's actually going to change quite a few things. There's a local company in Dallas called Mind VR, M-I-N-D VR, and they're working with Samsung and a company called Little Star and some other other people, and they're actually shooting content and making content for people with dementia, and specifically for people in old folks' homes, right, and care facilities. Yeah. And what they've done is they've went out and they shot a band, an old like 40s style music, a jazz ensemble, in period appropriate pieces, and they play this content back for these people in these old folks' home, and they literally break into tears.
Serious.
Because if you're in virtual reality, your body doesn't necessarily know that you're not actually there, and it freaks them out, man. It's so cool to see. So anyway, you should check that out, Mind VR. I don't have any interest in that company, but I use it as an example of saying what we know is virtual reality today is, guns and first-person shooters and all these things. I think there's much, much more to this concept. It's a much deeper technology than just simply shooting things. And so of all of the things that we've talked about, from apartment search all the way up to real-time audio and video analytics, and we didn't talk about inbound geo all that much, and that's fine. I think the important thing to note when you ask me that question is I'm giving up all of that stuff, right? I've built a bunch of products over the last 20 years to help people build or help people buy things more efficiently or help other people sell things. I'm done with that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus all of my technology experience and development experience in the realm of VR. And so in the new house that we build, I'm going to have a 12 by 12 foot space whose purpose is dedicated to virtual reality and development thereof. That's where I think everything's headed. I'm so confident in that we're kind of making some changes in our life to pursue that.
That's really cool, and I'm excited to continue following you on that, because specifically virtual reality is one of these technologies that I think is going to become a lot more prominent in the future. It's been really interesting to me seeing just the implications that, because I'm really passionate about, obviously with the podcast and stuff, education and just thinking differently about education and learning, and kind of doing away with this old model we've had for 150 years. And I think virtual reality could have a huge impact on that, as well as augmented reality, which I guess you would kind of lump underneath virtual reality. But just this idea that to be able to project stuff on real life things around you, it's really, really fascinating stuff.
So augmented reality is a very different thing, but I think it's also useful, right? The conversation is which is going to win, AR or VR, and I think they're so technologically different. It's not even, you can't even compare them, right? One relies on reality. You're looking through a pair of glasses or whatever, and you're seeing something projected onto either directly onto your eyeball or out in the field. Where virtual reality is 100% experiential, and it's immersive. You're in the space, right? Your brain doesn't know any different. So, I think there's promise in both of them for sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that one's gonna quote unquote beat out the other at all. I mean, I'm looking forward to the day when I can, put on a pair of glasses or whatever and feel like I'm in this totally immersive experience. But then I can say, put on a more smaller, sleeker pair of glasses and go for a run and see, mile check marks, on the road when I'm getting close, and my speed maybe up in the heads-up display or whatever. It just sounds. I'm super stoked to be alive today, and what's gonna come in the future. And it sounds like you're actively helping in that. But we're getting a little close on time here. I want to move into, and I could honestly, maybe we'll have you on again sometime, Michael, because I feel like there's a whole lot more that we didn't get to. But moving more into the lightning round now, what would you say is a personal habit that contributes to any success you've achieved so far?
Incessant curiosity. I don't know that I'd call it a habit, but I think a life philosophy is that if you're bored, you're doing something wrong. And there's just too much opportunity out there, too many things to learn, and too many things that I think people can pursue. They don't think they can necessarily, right? Like an artist who makes money selling art. Well, a whole bunch of people do. Figure out how to do it and do it.
Yeah, I can see that about you, and how I think you're a great example of somebody who's just pursuing that relentlessly. Do you have any books that you'd recommend to us, and why?
Well, let's see, books. So I'm looking at a book right now. It's called Do More Faster. Do More Faster is a book that was written by David Cohen and Brad Feld about the Techstars experience. I'm not recommending necessarily that you read it to join Techstars, but to see what happens when you have a bunch of people around you that are interested in your well-being and kind of helping you succeed. It's a great book for that. There's another book called The Total Money Makeover, which is by Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey has a system he calls the baby steps, wherein you pay off all of your debts, smallest to largest, and then start changing your life financially. It's really, really cool. Quick read. And that's what we did to pay off all of our debt in 2007. And then the last one is a book called The Starfish and the Spider. And the reason I like that book is that it really talks about decentralized organizations, right? So what was Napster's downfall?
I don't know.
Yeah. Do you remember Napster? Do you know what that is?
Yes, yeah, I do.
Napster's downfall was that it was centralized servers. They had servers that they operated, that they owned. The reason Kazaa wins is because it's distributed, it's peer-to-peer. And so if you take that same thinking, not that I'm into, stealing music or what have you, which is another thing. We don't pirate anything. We buy everything we own or we use. So even movies and all that. It's a whole different philosophical question. But the Apache Indians, right? The way they stuck around so long is because they didn't have a central command. They let the leaders of each of their tribes make decisions. Alcoholics Anonymous, you can go on and on about these leaderless organizations and how successful they are. And I think that's going to be part of the way our future evolves, is to leaderless organizations. Bitcoin and Ethereum are other examples of that.
Awesome. Okay, we'll have links to all that in the description. How much sleep do you get?
Plenty.
You get 8 hours or less, or?
Yeah, probably 8 hours or so. I mean, it just depends on if I'm binging on some sort of a project, or I just feel passionate about something, or I had coffee too late. But generally, these days it's probably about 8 hours. I like to get. I turned off my alarms in the morning, since kind of pulling back and having more of a minimalist approach to my calendar. I turned off my alarms for the morning, so generally I don't have anything to wake me up in the morning. My first appointments are after 11, so I sleep until whenever.
Awesome. Yeah. How much Netflix do you watch?
Netflix. So Netflix or digital media?
Either.
Yeah.
I guess how much digital media in general if you don't watch Netflix?
Tons. I watch tons of that stuff because we talked about YouTube is one of the best ways to learn just about anything right now. Mm-hmm. So I spend a ton of time following other people that are doing the experiment that we're going to do, which is with the RV, talking about building a home from scratch, following people that are doing that. But also I found that my wife, daughter, and I like to spend some family time together, and that's what we call it. So we'll watch maybe an hour or two of some form of content in the evenings, generally.
Awesome. Is there a favorite channel on YouTube or something that you follow? I guess if anybody's interested in living that kind of off-the-grid, minimalistic lifestyle, what kind of channels or media would you recommend they listen to or watch? Yeah,
so this is going to sound very self-promotional, but it's not intended to be. But Epic Mini Life has a YouTube channel, and I follow only the people that kind of make that impact. And so
there you go.
It's just kind of an easy way to get there. You don't have to subscribe to me, but there's a list of people that are there.
No, perfect, man. I want as many people to follow your story as possible, including myself. I'm gonna go there and check it out. Okay, Michael, last couple questions here for you. What parting advice do you have for any of our listeners who are thinking of dropping out of school, but they haven't quite made that step yet? Just some parting advice.
So this is going to be it's going to sound very simple. Remember for the rest of your life to separate the concept of school and education. They're two completely different things. School is a process. Education is for life. And so anytime you have something and you say, I don't know, or I should learn, or I'd like to learn, you absolutely can. Don't forget about iTunes U, which if you know iTunes, it's built right into the toolbar. It's 2,200 colleges and universities giving their content away for free. edx.edu is another one. That's MIT and Stanford and a bunch of other places got together to do that. Khan Academy, of course. But education is not school. And so don't feel like you're leaving your future to chance, because it's all in your control at this point.
Love that. Absolutely love that. What parting advice do you have for any of our listeners who have already dropped out and who already are on their entrepreneurial journey?
Well, assuming they're on an entrepreneurial journey, I think you're in a good place. Get connected to your local ecosystem if you have one. Many cities do now. I spent the last 3.5 years in Dallas trying to help build the one that we have here. It's phenomenal. The realization, though, is that most other cities are trying to do the same thing. And so just find your tribe, find other people like you, get to know them, ask for help, never be afraid to ask for help. And I would say for any of your listeners, the give before you get mentality will take you a long ways.
So good. So good, man. What's the best way for people to connect with you, Michael?
Friendmichael.com.
Friendmichael.com. Well, successful dropouts, you've been hanging out with Michael and Kylan, learning what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. For everything we talked about today, head over to successfuldropout.com and type Michael into the search bar, and the show notes will pop right up. And as always, stay hungry, stay foolish. Successful Dropouts, the best part for me about doing this podcast is actually not talking to the amazing guests I have on the show, but it's talking to you guys and hearing your story, where you're at, and how I can help. And so please get in touch with me. Find me on Facebook, follow me on Snapchat, hit me up on Instagram, send me emails. I always try to respond as quick as possible. You can find me at Kylan Ginger almost everywhere. And for my email, it's kylanginger@gmail.com. Again, that's just my first and last name, KYLONGIENGER. It's unique, so you should have no problem finding me, but get in touch.